Hey guys, Harv here, and welcome back to the Kerbal Space Program. This is episode 14 of Career Mode, which is nearly coming to a close. Career Mode as a series is very nearly over. The particular craft we have here, the first of many that we're going to fly in this episode, is called Moon Quickly, for one very accurate reason. It's going to take us to the moon very quickly. Now, I built this with that intention in mind, and whilst doing so I perhaps got a bit carried away with the ethos behind this mission and built it in a rush, meaning that I actually left out several major components, such as fuel lines. Now, I've only just realised that I want the outer tanks to drop before the inner ones have run out of fuel, so we cut the engines and turn them all off halfway through. It's a bit of impromptu, on-the-fly engineering that really makes KSP missions special for me now, because people often ask, how long have you been playing this game for? Answer is 3 years. 3 years of playing the same game. Surely it gets boring to do the same maneuvers over and over again. Well, by simply not being very good at the game, I managed to make them interesting. Yeah, you heard it here first, guys. Don't be good, and it gets more fun. That probably actually has some element of truth to it. Whatever the case, we get up into orbit, we burn sideways, increasing our orbital trajectory from merely suborbital to a pretty much circular orbit. Just going to achieve our apoapsis very, very soon. Very slight burning. There's our periapsis, and that is our circular orbit. And from then, we just need to wait until the moon is in the correct position, the correct launch window, as you could say, except for the fact that this isn't a launch, so you shouldn't say that because that would be entirely incorrect or inappropriate terminology. What you could say is the transfer window, which would be much more precise. So the transfer window has now arrived, the perfect visual cue being rising of the moon over the horizon there, which works for any orbit from around 70 kilometers to 130 maybe. You can just wait for the moon to rise over the orbit and that'll be the right time to burn, providing that you are going in a 90-degree orbit, that is following the rotation of the planet, rather than going in the opposite way. If you burn at the opposite, or if you are orbiting in the opposite direction, you see the moon rise and you burn at that time, you're not gonna get there, unless you do some weird high energy transfer burn, which would probably get you there quicker. You know, there's pros and cons to everything. I mean, it would take a hell of a lot more fuel, probably, but there may be some advantages to doing that. Whatever the case, second time I've said that in this video, whatever the case, third time, there we go. We bring our craft down, and we're getting there so quickly I don't even decide to drop the stage. I just try and land on the nozzle, because I'm a pro. I'm really good at this game, he says. And then it very nearly falls over and very nearly goes wrong. Jet off before that manages to happen though. Burn to something, our lateral velocity. Spin and knock that away to make it fly off of our field of view so we don't have to worry about it anymore. And then bring our landing ship down and land on the moon. Yes, we are landing on the moon for the first mission in this episode. But why, Harvey? Why? This is career mode. You're supposed to bring us new and varied things. Why are you simply going back to the same bodies we've seen many times before in yours and other people's videos? Well, the reason being is that we just want to get some science. It's it. That's all there is to it. We just need a little bit of science in order to unlock the mainsail engines. And that is the point of this video. The mainsail engines are the thing we desire most because they make launching so much easier. Skipper engines are pretty good, and we used skipper engines to get here. However, they just don't compare to fully fledged mainsails. However, mainsails currently cost about 550 science to unlock at this point, so we need to get that amount of science. We burn off of the moon, having collected as much as we can with this particular craft, burn out, burning so fast that we escape the moon's sphere of influence and bring our periapsis of Kerbal back down to within the atmosphere sooner or later. Currently 70 kilometers, there we go, 50 kilometers, 40... bringing it down, come on, can I see a 20, 20, going, 25? Okay, 25, gone, sold, something. Warping away from the moon, bringing ourselves back down to the planet. And then aero-capturing ourselves in order to actually land on the planet. And then, after a few more moments, opening the parachutes, and then, after a few more moments, detaching our science module here. Now, when I do that, some of you in the comments are going to go, or you watching this video, are going to go, "No, you've just lost all the science." Well, no, I haven't. And there's one good reason for that, and that's because you can actually move science from your module, or from your different utilities, into your command module, which is very, very good. Very useful, so you don't have to lug home all the utilities themselves, which was always a bit pointless. Anyway, we have got 570 units, 570 units of science, which is more than 550 for those of you doing your maths. 550 is in fact less than 570, which means we have enough to unlock the mainsail. However, when I did this recording, I was in call with Enter Elysium, and Enter Elysium was telling me the wonders of the aerodynamic nose sampling thingy-magobby-coney something. So I unlocked that instead, which also cost 550, and therefore we only have 20 science left. So the mission for Mainsails is still on, and now we're going to start building another craft, something that will happen in the next episode. It starts out as being simply a pro body with one of those aerodynamic thingy-majobby-coney thingies, but then we upgrade it slightly to give it an entire launch stage. And having said that, this ship is called an Eve Lander. An Eve Lander. So we're not going to Elu next, Harvey, we're going to Eve. Yes, I've decided that I will finally attempt to conquer Eve. And this thing is called Lander because it is in fact only a lander. Looking at this, you may assume that it's also a launch stage. Look at how many stages there are, look at all those boosters. You are ignorant. Evidently ignorant of what Eve is really all about. It is the second most hardest. That did not make sense. That was not grammatically correct. It is the second hardest planet or celestial body in KSP to land on and get back off of. The most dangerous planet to land on being Tylo, which is actually a moon of Joule. Very, very high gravity and no atmosphere, which means you can't just use parachutes, as we will be doing here. Perhaps Tylo, should we successfully conquer Eve, perhaps Tylo should be our next aim. Having said how easy it is to land on Eve using parachutes, it's not particularly great if you land upside down. Bear that in mind. The thing drops and everything explodes down on the ground, and pleasant as can be, our little, or rather big actually, launch stage or landing stage comes down and lands on top of us. So, landing on Eve, exactly what does it entail? Well, it entails ploughing your way through a very, very thick atmosphere and then trying to get back up off of that, or through that thick atmosphere, defying the extremely high specific gravity of, or surface gravity of the planet. What this means is that it's about 10 times harder to get into orbit around Eve than it is around Kerbal. So we are going to need the entirety of this lander. And in fact, the payload of this lander is actually only that little probe and a few of the, what are they called? The aerodynamic nose cone thingies, I've been calling them. A few of those, a few other science modules, and just a docking port. Because we'll get it up into orbit and hopefully deliver it up high enough so that it stays in an orbit, and then we're going to come rescue it later. That is the plan. All this effort just to land on one little planet. Rather big planet, really. And the effort does not continue, or does not stop here. Sure, we have our lander, sure, it probably won't work, but it seems that it has a chance of working. Surely we just need to send it out there. Yeah, we do. But we need mainsails for that. Returning in a somewhat cyclical nature back to the main topic, we need mainsails to successfully launch things, specifically this lander, because hey, we could build ourselves a massive, really big skipper engine configuration to get this 600-ton lander out to Eve, but it's going to be way bigger than it would need to be if we only had mainsails. So, having built our lander, we put it to the test by doing an entire Minmus mission using it, which, I don't know, that's kind of impressive, and that's kind of, it's quite promising actually. Being able to go all the way out to the furthest moon from Kerbal, land on it and return, has some merit to the possibilities of this lander actually working on Eve. Of course, we have yet to actually test it on Eve, which needs to be done in the next episode. So, we'll bring ourselves... Cars outside, eh? Gah, always interrupting me. We'll bring ourselves down, trying to do science as we do. Unfortunately, you can't do accelerometer things in the air, or more accurately, in the vacuum. It turns out accelerometers are actually used for seismic data. Which, you know, being KSP, being a game, it's not actually recording seismic data, it's just that you can only use them down on the surface. Which is a bit upsetting for me, actually. Thinking about it now, I would have liked to have seen some specific reading for the accelerometer when under the influence of artificial gravity, rotation, you know, when accelerating in a circular motion. That would be really, really cool. But unfortunately it won't happen because you can only do it down on the ground. Similarly, you can't do pressure in anywhere other than atmosphere, which you'd think is a bit silly, seeing as how do you know that the atmosphere of a vacuum isn't worth measuring? A vacuum isn't necessarily a complete vacuum. Space is not a perfect vacuum. There are particles in space. It's the reason why the Alcubierre or Alcubierre drive, warp drive theory majority will work. Because it uses particles and yet works in space. How can this be? Surely space is a vacuum. No, there are actually very, very scarcely placed hydrogen molecules. Hydrogen being the most abundant element in the universe. There's just bits of it scattered around everywhere. And yeah, so space is not a perfect vacuum. So I'm not entirely sure why they would limit the science module to only be used in an atmosphere. Oh well, limitations of the game, I suppose. Maybe they'll change it in the future. Science is still relatively new. But anyway, having come back from Minmus and bringing ourselves down, for the second time in this video we re-enter Kerbal, this time on the light side, in sunshine, which is quite nice because it does help to see what you're doing. Unfortunately it didn't help us that much, because we actually end up landing in the ocean. May sound reasonable to those of you who have no experience of KSP, but the water in the game, for those of you who know, and for those of you who don't know I'm going to tell you, the water in the game is actually a lot more dangerous to land in than the land is. Oh, hang on. Oh. I've got my orders mixed around. We're actually landing on land. We did manage to get overland. Huh. I guess seeing what we were doing did help. Well, that's me clearly demonstrating that I have no idea what I'm talking about. But still, that's a good thing because land is safer to land on than water. It's, what, softer? I don't really understand the logic behind it, it's just how the parts work in KSP. Anyway, bringing it down, we did not pack any parachutes, which means that we have to do a controlled landing using the engine nozzle. Didn't go so well on the moon earlier, but it does seem to be okay on Kerbal. There we go, landed, touchdown. We can perhaps do some pressure readings, there we go, a little bit of extra science perhaps, and then we'll recover our vessel and see exactly how much science we've been given. Will it be enough to unlock the mainsail? And no, it wasn't. We gained 413 science, which brought us up to 433 science total. We need 117 more science in order to unlock that mainsail, so I guess we have to do another mission. Now, I could go... I don't know, what could I do? I could go to Minmus with crew. That would probably unlock a couple of hundred science. Yeah, why don't I do that? Well, I think to myself originally, this is how the argument goes in my head, I could just launch the same craft and go to Kerbal somewhere. Maybe we'll get a few hundred science for doing that. And in fact, yeah, why don't I launch exactly the same craft and take it over to Kerbal somewhere? How about the mountains? Because I haven't been to the mountains before in the video. I haven't actually been to the mountains before in this save. Everything I've done in this save has actually been on video, so they're quite synonymous. So I do that. That is the idea, that's the plan. Unfortunately, I don't really think this through, and it turns out that landing on a mountain is a bit harder than it sounds. Even with parachutes, this section of the craft actually does have parachutes. We eject them quite viciously, bring ourselves down, using our engines just to slow us down sufficiently to land safely, but we end up on a slope. And I end up slowing us down too much, so the parachutes disappear, we drop, the engines collapse, and boom, boom, bosh, bang. And our science ends up on the mountain, which is fine, you'd think. The science is on the mountain. Surely I can just do the research and then get the recovery vessel and whatnot. Well, I would be able to do that if it wasn't falling down the mountain at the same time. or rolling more accurately. The science is going around faster than I can click, and because we're still moving, we're not allowed to recover the vessel. It's just one of those things. You have to be stationary in order to actually gain your science. So I'm frantically trying to fight this rolling motion, but it's very clear that this is not going to happen. You can see in the top right there, the electrical charge available to me is slowly running out, slowly diminishing. All the science modules go bang as we continue to speed up rolling down this mountain. And eventually that aerodynamic nose cone thingy sensor will to explode. There it goes, and now it's just a pro body and a strut rolling all the way down the mountain. You'd think that I would be annoyed, but actually it was quite funny watching this thing roll. We're completely out of electric charge, so it's doing it entirely by itself. However, it did not quite... It could have been successful, which would have been good, or it could have rolled all the way down the mountain, which would have been funny. Or it'll just end up not actually finishing the roll and will actually end up slowing down on the side of the mountain, as it does just about now. So quite disappointing. Oh well, back to that original plan then, I guess. We send Jebediah Kerman back out to Minmus, the second time, the third mission, or fourth mission in this one video. As I said at the start, you are quite lucky today, a lot of content in this 20 minutes. Jebediah Kerman goes out to Minmus for, yes, the third time in this universe, I think the third time, and we get some surface samples from the surface of Minmus, which will hopefully be enough to get us that amount of science. By the way, I like how we dropped that stage and it just bounced rather than destroying itself. I quite enjoyed that. Atmospheric pressure scan can't be done, but we can do the rest of the science. Getting back into our command module, we have plenty stored in here, but electricity, similarly to how it was rolling down the mountain, is running out. So we need to bring ourselves back up. We need to get home before the electricity runs out completely. The LV-909 engine doesn't generate any electricity. Now, some of the engines in the game do this, and rockets in real life do this as well. They generate electricity by... I don't know, is it heat exchange? You could probably use the heat to power a turbine or something. Or perhaps it's the exhaust gas. Some of it is used to power a turbine, which turns a motor, which turns a thing and makes electricity. But the LV-909, the engine perfect for landing on most planets, doesn't do that, which is quite disappointing. Not to worry though, we do manage to get back in time with sufficient electrical charge, burning through the atmosphere, carving our way through that thick mush, and eventually opening the parachutes, detaching the stage, and watching this radar altimeter slowly fall to 100, and then to 50, and then to 10, and then we land. Recover the vessel immediately, and we shall see just how much science we get. What do you think? I think we got loads. 783 science in total. Plenty to unlock our mainsail, which is what we do immediately. And now it is my proud pleasure to present the Eve Lander plus launcher. That lander, as I said earlier, weighed 600 tons. So it only makes sense to have a several thousand ton rocket to launch it. Anything else simply would not suffice. So, we take the design that I previously worked on off camera, and I strap a load of mainsails to it. Without mainsails, this thing didn't even get off the ground. That's how heavy this is. And slowly scrolling up, we see we have a big not an interplanetary stage, we have a big launch stage, followed by another big launch stage, which is equipped with 7 mainsail engines. Bottom one has 19, I believe, or 16 or something. And we can continue putting mainsails on all of them. I didn't include the building of this entire thing in the footage because I thought it wouldn't really be necessary. You know that I can build big ships, you've seen it so many times before. If you haven't, if this is the first HOCgaming video you've watched, then you should go watch the other ones. And yes, scrolling up the rocket, we see just how big this thing is. Oddly enough, this is the only rocket I've built in the past... it must be several months. The past several months that actually looks like a rocket. And that is quite odd. because this is this is the biggest rocket I have ever built that has a chance of being successful. You may you may gasp, you may go, but hang on, KSP is all about building big rockets. Well, for me, I like to play quite moderately, quite modestly, perhaps. So I'm not really into the big, massive, dumb blast-off stages. So this will be my first foray into that, and we'll see how that goes in the next episode. Thank you very much for watching this episode, episode 14, if you can't remember the title, of Career Mode. And we're going to go to Eve in the next one. Just before I end the video, however, I would like to remind you, for those of you who may not know, or for those of you who have simply forgotten, that I do have t-shirts available to buy at Spreadshirt, what's it? Hang on. It's HOCgaming.spreadshirt.co.uk. 4 designs currently, going to be more arriving in this year, so you should definitely keep an eye out on that. I will be telling you if there are more, and if you want to just be incredibly attractive, then you should probably go buy one of those. T-shirts and mugs. What more in life do you need? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.